my Patreons was to use rice powder or rice milk in a soap. So I'm going to do both of those things. First thing I'm going to do is make some rice milk. Now, making rice milk is very easy, and if you see my oat milk soap, I made oat milk in that, and it's pretty well a very similar process. So all you want to do is cook yourself some rice. So I've just cooked some rice, just boiled it, and then I've just let it cool and sort of dry out a little bit. So it's not all soppy and wet, but it's certainly not dry. There's certainly a wettish edge to it, and it's nice and soft. Now, normally, when you make a rice milk to drink, the ratio is normally to take 1 part rice to 4 parts water, and that's normally done from a volume point of view. I'm just going to run through how I do the calculations to make up my rice milk and factor it into my soap when we've got to deal with a lye solution as well. Now, if you're not interested in all of the calculations, then just jump to the next section of the video. Right. When we deal with soap making, we know that we always use weight for our measurements, not volume, because weight is far more reliable and consistent. Now, if you ever see any recipes for making rice milk, typically they're done in volume. And the recipe that you normally get is that for your rice milk, you would have 1 cup of rice to 4 cups of water. Now, to be honest, if you just want to make some rice milk nice and easy, you could stick with doing those volume measurements. It's going to be fine. But if you want everything to be consistent, always be happy that you're always making up your rice milk the same way. You should be using weight. I would need to use weight anyway because, as I'm sure most of you know, I'm in the UK and we have to measure and weigh every single thing and report every single thing that goes into our soap. So I need to use weight rather than volume anyway. So to change this into a weight measurement, I literally took 1 cup of my cooked rice, and that weighed 125 grams, and 1 cup of water, which is 250 grams. Now, I know technically an official cup of water weighs 236 grams, but that's one of the things with using volume, isn't it? When I filled up my cup measurement, I was obviously a tiny little bit over the line, and I've ended up with 250 grams of water, but look at those figures. That works out lovely, doesn't it? Because look, my rice is exactly half of the weight of my water. And that means I can always use those figures every single time and get a consistent result. So how do we take this to be our milk then? Well, we know to make our rice milk, we would use 4 cups of water to 1 cup of rice. So let's put that in volume. So 1 cup of rice would be 1 lot of 125 grams. And 4 cups of water would be 4 lots of 250 grams. So that would be 1,000 grams or a kilogram. So if you wanted to make up a whole bunch of rice milk, you could just make it up using those figures. Now, obviously, you wouldn't have to make up that much. You could make up less than that, more than that, but just use those ratios for when you're making up your rice milk. So what we're then going to have a look at is how we then use this to replace the water in our soap. Now, I'm going to go through it in quite a simple way here. What I'm actually going to do in my soap is I'm going to make my rice milk up in such a way that I can just add it to my oils, but have it that it's a super strength so that it's the equivalent of doing a complete water replacement. Now, when we do a complete water replacement, we normally have to freeze the substitute item like the milk and then do the lye over the ice cube method to make up our lye. I don't want to do that. I just want to make up my lye, and then I want to tip my rice milk into my oils and blend it in that way. So what I'm actually going to do in my soap is different to these measurements, but I'm just going to go through a normal way you would do with normal rice milk in your soap. Now, if you want to see this other method and how I do it so I can do this water replacement and not have to use ice cubes, pop over to my Patreon page. I'll be doing a little tutorial over there going through all the calculations and how you can do this to do a full water replacement without having to replace all of your water. Okay, so yes, that will be available on my Patreon page, so you can pop over there and see that if you fancy it. Let's have a look at how we then replace some of our water with our milk. So think about your normal recipe. Now in this recipe that I'm using for this soap, I would typically have 325 grams of water in my soap. I would also have 180 grams of lye. Now, as we've just said, to make up a lye solution, you must always have at least as much water to lye to ensure that it dissolves properly and safely. So therefore, if we look at those figures, I would normally have 325 grams of water. I need to use 180 grams to make up my lye. So therefore, that means out of that solution, I don't need 145 grams, and that can go to make my milk. Okay, so I know now that what I'm going to do is I'm going to make up my lye solution, and then I'm going to have my milk separate. And if you've just made up your lye solution, your milk, I meant to say, using these amounts here, then you would weigh your milk and pour off 145 grams of it ready to go into your soap. I'm just going to put this into my Nutri Ninja bullet thing. It's probably a bit too much to go in there, so I'm going to have to do it in stages. I'm just going to pour some of that out. Not ideal, I know, but it's not all going to fit in there in one go. I think that will be fine. So I'm just going to really blitz this like mad. And I'm going to turn the sound off because this is really loud. Okay, so I've blended it together and done in various parts and kept mixing it round. And I've got all my rice milk now. And it looks pretty good actually, because I've blended it, I've really run it through a good few times. I've stopped because it's actually started to get a little bit warm, so I want to get it in the fridge, but there doesn't really seem to be much residue left. Now, normally if you're making rice milk to drink, you would now run it through a muslin cloth or something to strain out any sediment, because you don't want bitty milk. I'm kind of in two minds whether to do that, because what's been requested for this soap is that we try rice milk and or rice flour. And I'm going to put some rice flour in as well. All rice flour is really is ground down rice. And the reason I'm adding the rice flour is because we want to see if it gives any exfoliation, any very gentle exfoliation to the bar, or whether it's a bit like colloidal oats or something, you kind of don't really notice it. So what I am going to do, because you might say, well, why don't you just leave the bits in that? I want to just do normal rice milk on its own. I am going to strain it out and get rid of any sediment or any bits, and then add in the rice flour as a separate ingredient, as it were, just so we can see if it does make an effect. And if there is any exfoliation in the bar at all, we know that definitely will have come from the rice flour. So here I'm going to take this and now cool it. I'm going to leave it overnight in this state. Pop it in the fridge. You must put things like rice milk in the fridge. Just because it's not animal fats, people think you don't have to put them in the fridge. You do still need to put them in the fridge, so make sure that you do that. So I'm going to leave that to sit and get nice and cold, sit overnight, just because I'm not making my soap till tomorrow, and then I'll strain it out in the morning. And it'll be interesting to see how much residue that there is, and obviously overnight that would have had a lovely long time to get as much from that rice as it possibly can. I mean, certainly looking at it, can you see? I mean, I'm sure we will get some when we try and strain it, but can you see how sort of, it certainly doesn't look bitty. I'm sure if I drank some of it, it probably would have a little bit of a texture to it. Right, let's leave that in the fridge and I'll strain it off tomorrow. So here's everything the next morning. Now there's no need to chill this overnight, it's just that I didn't need it until this morning, so I thought I might as well leave it together before straining it, so as much can be extracted from the rice as possible. I'm just going to strain it through this bit of muslin cloth. I use this same cloth, you know, for quite a few things with my soap making. You know, if I'm making any infusions and things and I want to strain those, I use this cloth as well and then just wash it each time. Okay, so I'm just going to gradually let that strain through. And it'll be interesting to see how many bits and pieces there are in there when that's all strained out, and also it'll be interesting to see what amount of milk we then get out of it, because there will be a little bit of wastage, and that'll always be helpful for when we make it in future, if we're making it for a specific recipe, how much we actually need to make to get the required amount for our soap. So I'm just going to leave that to do its thing and then we'll come back. So here's my rice milk that's gone all the way through, and I did have to sort of gather up the little bag because it was draining really slowly and I was a bit bored waiting, and I just sort of squeezed it a little bit, but pretty well ended up with no sediment. There's a tiny little bit of dampness still there, so obviously my super powerful blender that I've got is pretty good at taking that down into the tiniest little particles, because this is, as you can see, very fine. It's actually sort of a kilner that they use for jam making cloth, and I always use it, as I say, for straining out, you know, if I've ever infused anything in my lye solution or anything like that. So that's good, because that means that I had very little wastage. Everything's a tiny particle size and all of that's in there. There's my lovely rice milk. So let's make up our lye solution now. You don't often see me make up a lye solution on screen. That's because I master batch all of my lye, but because I'm doing a different ratio of water to lye than my normal soaps, I'm making it up as a separate amount. So I've got the same weight in water as I have for my lye. So it's this is the strongest you should ever do a lye solution. You should always make sure that you've got at least as much water to lye to make sure that you can dissolve that lye properly. Okay, my water's nice and cold. I keep my distilled water in the fridge at all times. So I tend to find that cuts down on the fumes quite a bit. Okay, so I'm just going to stir that, make sure it's all dissolved, then I will cover it and then just let it cool down nicely until it's ready to use. Okay, so let's put this soap together. So I've got all the oils I need for my batch. I've got that strong lye solution, so I've taken out as much water as I can from that. And then I've got my rice milk that we made. And remember, again, this is a strong solution of rice milk. I was able to do that because I made the rice milk myself. I was able to reduce the amount of water that I wanted. So effectively what's happening is, using this super strong rice milk is equivalent to if I did a complete water replacement and there wasn't any water in there. But it just saved me doing that and going through the whole ice cube method or anything. And then, as I said, the other thing that was requested was to use some rice powder or rice flour to see if it gives any exfoliation effect. Now, I felt this, and the grains do have a tiny weeny little sort of graininess to them. You know, it's not a completely smooth powder, so hopefully that exfoliation might come through, and we'll see. when we've finished this soap. It might be that they just soften and disperse into the soap and you can't feel them, but hey, that's why we're doing this, to see. And then finally, I'm not colouring it, I'm leaving it white. I've got an essential oil blend. This is juniper, clary sage and peppermint. Right, so let's get this mixed up. So the first thing I want to do is get this rice flour mixed into my oils. So I get it nicely dispersed and don't have to worry too much about acceleration. A bit like if you use colloidal oats or something, you would typically add them to your oils and get them blended in before you add anything else. Oh, they've created quite a lot of bubbles, haven't they? Okay, so let's get our strong lye solution in. Right, I'm going to add in my I keep calling it goat's milk, my rice milk. And then my essential oil blend. Okay, I have got that coming to a trace now. So we just need to get that poured into our mould. Okay, so just a very simple pour. See how that's starting to thicken up, and actually I can feel it warming up. Okay, so I'll just leave that for a few moments and then we'll do a little texture on the top and then we'll set that aside for this evening. So let's get this top texture. This is set up really quickly and it's really beautiful and smooth and creamy. So that's nice. Okay, now I am going to keep this cool. There's nothing wrong. Some people do C-pop their milk soaps, and that's fine. It does work okay. The reason I'm keeping this one cool is because if you C-pop a milk soap, it will go a darker colour, which is great if you've got colourants, say you're using micas. You know, a lot of people use goat's milk and things like that in a lot of their soaps, and it's just one of their normal ingredients. And because they use micas and all that sort of stuff, the colour that the base goes, as it were, isn't that important, so it's fine to C-pop them. Yes, there is a potential for overheating, so you just need to be a little bit careful. But this, I want it to stay a nice creamy light colour. And ideally, I don't want it to go through gel because that will force it to go that darker colour. So for me, I'm going to keep it cool by putting it in the fridge. So here's our rice milk soap the next day. Now obviously it's not going to be very exciting when I cut it because it's going to be hopefully just like this all the way through. So let's just get it on our cutter. Now normally when I just do a single coloured soap like this, I kind of don't feel it's necessary to chop the end bits off, but it would be nice with this soap because we want to see whether there's any exfoliation or anything, it will be nice to have some little extra end bits that I can make a little tester out just to see how it feels. Okay, there we are. Okay, so just looking like a nice creamy white soap at the moment. So as cutting plain white soap isn't very interesting, I thought after we'd seen a bar or two, then we'll have a look at what's going on with this little offcut. Now, really all I want to test this for is to see if there's any exfoliation that we're getting from that rice powder that went in, but obviously we can have a look at the lather. Now at the moment this little offcut is just literally those end pieces plus the bits that I beveled off the soap, is about a week and a half, 2 weeks old, so it's not going to be at its complete best yet, but let's just see what we get. Okay, a little bit of a lather on it. I know some people might think that's great. I mean, but that lather will get better. My soaps normally lather quite a bit better than that, but remember this isn't actually cured yet. But I'm just trying to feel for any exfoliation. I definitely can't feel any. It does seem to be, just have a rinse off. Does just seem to be a smooth soap. So yeah, I'm just trying to, I know we normally like to do a lather test. I'm trying to sort of ignore the lather and see if there's any, definitely, you know, it hasn't got any exfoliation really. I mean, I'm trying very hard to feel to see if there is any in there. So I think what happened is, as we thought it might, that rice powder, although it had a little bit of texture on it when it went in, it's obviously absorbed into the soap and just gone quite soft, just like, you know, when you put colloidal oats or something in your soap. They do add a benefit to the soap, but they don't tend to make it exfoliating. So yeah. Rice powder, not for exfoliation. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that lather develops over the full cure. It's looking promising, isn't it? With just a week, I think it's just over a week that's been cut now.
And then I'll just leave you with a couple of pictures of the final soap. I hope you've enjoyed this video and that you like the soap. If you have, it would be great if you gave me a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see what I'm making in the future, why not subscribe to my channel? Thanks for watching everyone, I really appreciate it. Happy soaping!